there and welcome back to my channel. I've been working on this project for a couple weeks now, so I'm excited to finally have it done and share it with you guys. So this is what my couch looks like at the moment, and you may be wondering why there are blankets over the arms of the chairs. It's definitely not a design statement. In fact, I think it makes the whole living room look a little shabby. So anyway, when our dogs were puppies, they went through a chewing stage, like most dogs do. When we'd leave the house, we'd come back to find the living room a complete mess, usually torn up magazines and ripped throw pillows, but occasionally the legs of chairs or the arms of couches were also victims of our puppies' teeth. And yes, that is blood. You'd think they'd stop when it started hurting, but apparently not. Our dogs are well past that stage now, so it's time for some long overdue upholstery magic. When the puppies destroyed the arms, the couch was less than a year old, so buying a new one wasn't an option, and really, the only issues were the arms and one small hole in the cushion. So I started brainstorming what I could do to repair the couch without making it look tacky, and I decided leather would be the perfect solution. It would be like a professor wearing a jacket with leather patches on the elbows, comfortable yet classy and chic. So if you're watching this because you're in a similar situation and need ideas to mend your furniture, here are the supplies I used. Some sort of padding. I used quilter's batting as I had some left over from a previous upholstery project. Scissors, cardboard, a staple gun would be helpful, an upholstery needle, it's curved, pins, thread. I used strong upholstery thread, whatever material you're using as patches, and thread to match that. You'll also need some sort of fabric to hold the scraps of couch material together and make for a stronger, longer lasting repair. It doesn't matter what color it is, since it will be covered up by the patch, so you can use scraps from a previous project or an old t-shirt. Start by cutting the cardboard to fit over any holes in the frame. You can see that my couch used to have a thin piece of wood here, but the puppies chewed it up. The cardboard will prevent the padding from falling into the hollow arm of the couch. Staple it onto the wooden frame, hammering in the staples if your gun isn't strong enough. As you can see, I'm just using the cardboard from one of my cereal boxes. Next, start adding padding wherever it's needed. You want to aim for the same level of cushiness as the rest of the couch arm. At the corners, you may want to cut off the excess material so that the edges aren't too rounded or bulky. You especially want to do this on a couch like mine, where the arms are so angular. Next, tie off any loose threads that you can. Taking the time to do this will prevent the seams from unraveling further and will give you a longer lasting repair. I also cut off any unnecessary fabric on the ragged edges. Doing so will make the sewing easier and you won't have to deal with any long loose threads. Cut your scrap fabric to the right size and tuck it under the existing fabric of the couch arm. This is the upholstery needle. It's curved to make it easier to sew when you don't have access to the back of the project. I couldn't have completed this repair without this needle. I'm using a thick gray upholstery thread. I started on the seam of the couch where I could sew the existing fabric back together. Then I moved on to the rest, where I'm sewing the edge of the couch fabric to the blue backing fabric. You may be wondering why do any of this, since it's all going to be hidden by the patch anyway. The main reason is so that the visible part of the couch fabric lies flat and taut. You want to secure it so that there are no folds or creases or uneven pulling of the fabric. This is going to make your repair look more professional. Another reason is that if you don't attach all the edges securely, the fabric may shift underneath the patch. As people sit on the couch and lean on the arms, the fabric could bunch up or a stray edge could appear from underneath the patch. Here's what the arm looks like after I'd finished this stage. Not a pretty sight, but that's what the leather patch is for. Put your patch material over the repair and determine how you're going to orient it and how you want it to look. My leather doesn't have a straight edge and I wanted to utilize that. I didn't want to cut out a perfect rectangle. I wanted the patch to look more organic, like it grew there. At the same time, I needed to make sure the leather covered all of the sewed edges. The other difficulty with leather is that it's stiffer and thicker than a regular fabric, so I needed to get an idea of how it was going to lie and minimize any buckling. Once I figured out where the leather was going to be, I cut off the excess, making sure not to cut in a straight line, but trying to mimic the raw edge of the rest of the piece. Now comes a pretty tedious process. Because the leather is so thick and durable, I'm not going to be able to just sew it on like I would a regular piece of fabric. Instead, I need pre-made holes for the needle to go through. If you work with leather on a regular basis, you probably already have an awl or a diamond chisel that you can use to make the holes. If you don't, you're welcome to go buy one, or you can do what I'm doing. Use a hammer, a nail, and a lot of patience. I'm using a scrap piece of wood under my leather so that I have a surface to nail into. This is a long, tedious process as you want the spacing between the holes to be as even as you can get it. And if you're not careful, you'll miss the nail a couple of times and hit your fingers instead. Once you have holes all around the edge, you're ready to start sewing the leather patch onto the arm of the couch. Position the patch correctly, making sure all of the repair work is hidden. I used pins to hold the patch in place while I sewed. This made it a lot easier and also ensured that the patch wasn't stretched too tightly or attached too loosely. I have a tan thread that matches my leather really closely. I didn't want to draw attention to any uneven stitches, but if you're confident in your sewing ability, you could use a contrasting color to make the stitches more of a design element. The thread is not an upholstery thread, so I've got it doubled for extra strength and durability. You want to start and end your sewing on the underside of the leather, so that there are no unsightly knots visible. From the back of the leather, put your needle through the first hole and pull your thread through. Now your needle and your thread are on the front or top of your project, which is what you want. From there, put your needle through the next hole, making sure that the needle goes through some of the backing fabric as well. Then angle the needle so that it comes up through the next sequential hole. Even with the curved needle, this can be difficult, especially if your holes are too close together. And even with the pre-made holes, there can be a lot of resistance from the layers of fabric, padding, and leather. My fingers were getting really sensitive from the needle, so I bought a thimble, and that helped a lot with any stitches that were particularly difficult. Work your way around the entire patch, removing pins as you go. If you want, you can do a back stitch, so that there is a continuous line of stitching around the entire edge. But unless your holes are really precise and even, I found this to look a little untidy. It also creates double the work. You'll notice that as I go, sometimes the thread gets knotted as I pull it through. This is because it's doubled and the thread gets twisted. It's fairly easy to unknot these, but I found that if I put my finger through the loop, it helps stop the thread from knotting in the first place. As I got to the end, I found I had a little more excess leather than I liked. I also realized that I didn't have any pre-made holes where the leather overlapped. Making holes while the patch was attached to the arm was probably going to be more trouble than it was worth, so I figured I could glue down the edge instead. I thought this would also be a little more discreet and streamlined as well. When you get to the last hole in your leather, make the stitch as usual, but before you pull the thread all the way through, put the needle through the loop to make an inconspicuous knot. Then go back over your stitch and pull the thread to the back side of the leather, so that when you cut the thread, the free end is not visible. As far as what glue to use, super glue would work, but when it dries, it's brittle and you really want something that will flex with the fabric. So I went to Home Depot and got this shoe glue, which is advertised as strong and flexible and can be used on rubber, leather, vinyl, and canvas. I'm applying it to one side and spreading the excess inward, as I don't want it oozing out when I press it onto the other side. The adhesion was pretty quick and I only had trouble at the top, where the leather pulled a different direction. So I used a pin as a sort of clamp to hold the leather together as it dried. This is on the other side of my couch. The damage on this arm was not as extensive as the other. As you can see, I've already added the padding and sewn the backing fabric in place. I learned some lessons from the other arm, so when I punched the holes on this piece of leather, I made sure that they weren't too closely together. This made sewing on this patch a lot easier than the other arm. As before, the first thing I'm doing is positioning the patch correctly and then pinning it in place. As you sew, there will be times that there'll be a crease in the leather. This is because you're attaching essentially a flat material to a three-dimensional object. There are ways you can lessen this effect, like cutting away excess material at the corners, or even just by the way you position and stretch the leather. Do your best to make these creases or folds look as intentional and streamlined as possible. You can see the culprits running around in the background and wondering what I'm doing. I've had blankets over the arms of the couch for so long that they're confused by their absence. You'll see on the front of this arm I have a sort of triangular cutout, which makes a sort of design element, while also preventing buckling. When I finished the stitching, the edge of the triangle stuck out a little further than I liked, so I glued it down as well. This is what my couch looks like now. It looks 100 times better than having the blankets over the arms. Yes, you can tell it's been repaired, but I think using leather makes the patches look like a cool design element. It gives the couch a sort of rustic yet chic vibe. I love the contrast of the grey fabric to the tan color of the leather. I'll admit that the living room isn't styled up exactly the way I want it to be, but I'm working on it, and getting those shabby blankets off the couch goes a long way toward making the room feel more modern, clean, and put together. What did you guys think? Do you like the look of the leather? I was worried it would end up looking tacky, but I really love how it turned out. If you haven't already, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. I post every week, either on Friday or Saturday, so be sure to hit the bell to be notified when new content goes up. To watch some of my other upholstery projects, click here, and check out my organization playlist by clicking here. As always, thanks to everybody out there watching and supporting my channel, and cheers for now.